So for experienced designers, it's really exciting to have, to think, past the visual sense and start to have a, whole sensory array to start designing with.
This is Velocitize Talks. I'm Eric Jones. I'm here with Jordan Higgins, the head of immersive experience at U Group. Jordan, great to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about U Group and what makes you special in the marketplace.
Sure. U Group is a digital transformation company that really specializes in bringing human-centered design and technology together to solve really complex challenges for our clients. I think one of the things that really makes us stand out and also kind of makes it a great place to be is that we have such a awesomely diverse mix of skill sets and people from different backgrounds and experiences that we can really pull together across several different practice areas to put together teams for different projects, drawing on user experience, on design, data science and engineering, software engineering and architecture, security. Like it's really able to take that full service approach to taking on really, really hard problems.
That's an interesting thing. So hiring people from all these different backgrounds. Are there any new skills that you're looking at for the future?
Absolutely. So I think the data science and engineering has been probably one of the fastest growing capabilities that we've really seen a lot of need for, in terms of and sort of on the immersive AR VR side of things. The demand for people that are familiar with XR and the things that come along with that, familiarity with 3D, with animation, with game engines, a lot of things that were sort of traditionally in sort of the game development world, we're seeing a lot of demand for more applications as well.
Nice. So obviously you have a huge background in immersive experiences and mixed reality. Where in that sector are you placing your bets today?
So right now we kind of have, I would say, three pillars that we're looking at as immersive as a capability. Probably the one where we're seeing the most demand in the market right now is for mobile augmented reality. That's where we're seeing more people reaching out to us and kind of they're seeing more of it out there from big brands and influencers, and I think they're starting to see, well, how what can that do for us? And the technology itself and the capability is getting to a point now where there's broad enough adoption that it's really becoming, you're seeing that return on that investment to spend some time with it. The other ones that we're looking at are immersive virtual reality, where there's been some really, really cool things happening in that space. Again, with the hardware and the ability to create content, those things are coming together at a price point now that's really driving adoption. And then finally, 360 video as sort of a storytelling mechanism and a training tool, also seeing a lot of interest and demand in that.
So aside from cost, what are some of the impediments that you're seeing in immersive today?
Sure. So traditionally, one of the biggest challenges that we've seen has really been sort of limitations of sort of the experience itself. On the hardware side, a lot of the platforms can be, not terribly portable. They can be terribly, they can be somewhat expensive. They can be very involved to set up, to especially when we're looking at systems that involve external trackers or, the need to tether through cables to more powerful computers and things like that.
I think it's well understood that VR helps, especially from a visual perspective, with training quite a bit. Tell us about some of the other senses that people are beginning to use, from an immersive experience standpoint,
Sure.
To assist with training.
So for experienced designers, it's really exciting to have to think past the visual sense and start to have a whole sensory array to start designing with. The spatial audio becomes one of the the first and often the most commonly areas for opportunity to think about how do we recreate real ambient sound and important cues in an environment, especially to tie into training. In the football program, having the roar of the crowds and the play calls and calls from players who are in different positions adds a tremendous amount to the realism. But I think one of the things as we sort of dive deeper into this that becomes really interesting is thinking about those other senses too. I spent a little bit of time studying architecture, and there was a really fascinating essay called The Seven Senses of Architecture, where it talks about the five senses that we're familiar with, the sight, sound, smell. And then it gets into sort of two others that really primarily relate to our physical experience of being. The first being vestibular, so balance, and you see some really interesting examples of that with people training on boards on the floor to simulate being up on like a skyscraper beam or something like that, and that ability to kick in that sense of balance, even though you know that you're safe and you're not going to fall 10 stories, but just that feeling of it when you have that visual reinforcement at scale becomes very powerful, and it's very acclimating, so that if you do end up in that position, you aren't really feeling that necessarily for the first time. The other big one is proprioception. This was a new one for me. I hadn't really heard about that as much until I started working with this. And that's that sense of bodily awareness of the amount of effort it takes to do something like open a door or push a button or a lever. That becomes a very, one of the examples I cite is the example of opening your door at home versus opening a door someplace that you've never been. Your brain will see things in the environment that you can anticipate whether a door is heavy or not, but it's still going to feel different than the door that you've opened several times a day for years and years and years, right? Like your brain knows that. It's developed muscle memory around that, and that becomes a very powerful driver as well.
What advice would you have for brands who are looking to wade into experiential marketing or immersive?
Absolutely. So, one of the things that we always start with is strategy. So whether it's an immersive project or not, trying to really understand, who the people that are involved in, both from the stakeholders and sort of the, desired audiences' perspectives. What is the problem that you're trying to solve, and then where does where are there opportunities to address them? Really focusing on what that measurable impact is early on really drives finding the best uses of the technology. And then for anything immersive, starting with the proof of concept even, and then from there going into a pilot, looking for small, meaningful ways to get to see what the technology actually does and build from there, learn the lessons early on, so that as you scale out and grow, you'll be able to kind of grow with the technology itself. I think that's especially key with emerging technology, I think, just because it changes so quickly.
You've obviously done some pretty successful campaigns, whether that's in the AR space or in immersive. I wonder if you could share some examples of what you've been able to do for clients.
We were working with our partners at NASA's Earth Science Observation team. They were specifically looking for a way to communicate the value of Earth science observations and sort of what its impact is on everyday life. And this combined actually creating a physical sort of installation experience that they could take to a conference with a web experience that supported it and was able to reach a larger audience. And what we were, this is a really good example of why, starting with story, really, makes for a compelling experience. Whatever the immersive aspect of it is, whether it's in a headset or on a phone or on a desktop computer, that story that we started with of when people think NASA, they normally think space, they think, out there. This was, what NASA, a big part of what NASA does is observing the Earth from, sort of that outside in. And how that translated into things like, real actionable insights for the role of trying to save honeybees and their role in agriculture, or water levels, or things like that. And it one of the things that was really powerful with that is that this combination of the web experience and the physical, actually helped them connect, and we actually got really positive response from their legislative affairs department about how they were able to reach an entirely new audience that they hadn't really connected with before, and it became a very powerful tool for making the case of the role that Earth science plays in sort of everybody's and the general public's everyday lives.
How far away do you think we are from websites that are truly immersive and very different from the 2D versions that we have today?
That's a really good question. So you asked earlier, like what I'm most excited about on the horizon, and I think I would say WebXR, like this ability to create really high quality augmented and virtual reality experiences using the web. you're seeing some really interesting stuff out there now, and I don't really think we're far away at all. Like this is probably one of the things that's driving. When we look at demand signals in the market, this is absolutely something that we're seeing more people come to, and it's actually that conversation is going from sort of wouldn't it be cool if to like, okay, well, let's build a proof of concept, let's build a pilot. Some of the things that we've got in the works now are largely WebXR driven.
So from a KPI perspective, what is the typical lift that you'll see from adding immersive to any of the things that the typical sort of digital marketing tools that are being used?
I wish I had like hard numbers that I could actually share right now, because it's fairly early for us as well, and a lot of what we're seeing out there, we're seeing positive signs that it's increase. One of the first ones that I would say, anecdotally, we see increased time spent on site. So traditionally, my background was in web design before sort of moving into AR and VR. Traditionally, if you saw people sitting on a page for more than 10 seconds, 15 seconds.
That was a win.
Yeah. Well, it was either a win or there was, maybe also a potential sign of a problem, right? Like if you're trying to help people navigate through, we're seeing people spend, minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It really depends on the length of the story. But you're seeing people engage much deeper. You're thinking about websites as, less of a, okay, what is the happy path through to, wherever the end user is trying to go to, to meet the business goal. In this case, it's as a storytelling platform or as a training platform. We're more looking at what are people doing inside that the space of that experience, and then the traditional ones like it's interesting to have a baseline of what a organization's metrics for a web platform were initially, and then kind of see, did WebXR increase numbers there? Did it, are we seeing new sources of traffic coming in? Are people referring, sharing stuff out from it more? Things like that. So it's, and again, I think that really helps with the, educating, customers and trying to make the business case for it, because it's building off of something familiar rather than trying something that's completely new.
Right. Jordan, one of the questions we love asking our guests is a book or podcast that you'd like to recommend to our viewers.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, the podcast that I listen to the most regularly is the VR/AR Association podcast. Every time they release a new one, Sophia and Tyler, who are the hosts of that podcast, they connect with they're sometimes really really deep industry pulls, but they're right on the front lines of talking to people who are building some of the coolest stuff in immersive technology. Also, Voices of VR is a podcast by the host Kent Bai, which is another one that Ken, I think is sort of on the front lines and out on the ground at a lot of of sort of industry events and talking to people that are doing very very not just cool but like meaningful work in sort of the immersive space.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jordan.
My pleasure.
That was Jordan Higgins, the head of immersive technology at U Group.